There are almost certainly a lot of things that you're doing that are going to keep you broke. The first is what we were talking about in the last question. It's all about financial literacy. Do you know how money actually works? As somebody who came to this game really late, I understand how easy it is to be educated, to be, dare I say, intelligent, and still not actually understand how money actually functions. And so you want to make sure that you're taking time to get financially literate. The next thing is, and some of these are going to be so basic and people don't do them, you need to stop spending so much money. Most people live paycheck to paycheck. Even people that are making six figures live paycheck to paycheck. It's something like 2/3 of people that make $250,000 a year still live paycheck to paycheck. So the goal is, instead of flexing on how much money you make, you want to make sure that you're living below your means. If you want to dramatically reduce the amount of stress in your life and set yourself up for success, you want to make sure that you're living below your means. Now, as you begin to live below your means, the first habit you're going to want to introduce is that you're going to start saving some of your money. So of course, there's going to be an amount that you're going to allocate towards your living expenses, your house payment or your rent, your car payment, insurance, all of that stuff, food. But then you want to make sure that automatically you're saving money. If you're not automatically saving money, then you're walking down the path of remaining broke. So you want to make sure that you're living below your means, and you want to make sure that you're automatically saving money. Now, once you have saved up enough money that you have somewhere between 6 and 12 months of emergency cash on hand, if you get sick, if you hate your job, any of that stuff is exacerbated 1,000-fold if you're living paycheck to paycheck, because now you've got nowhere to go. There's no way for you to be able to weather that storm. And so it's what's known as a threshold event. Everything in your life may seem like it's going well until you hurt your back and you're unable to go to work for 2 months and you were living paycheck to paycheck and now you're in financial ruin. Or God forbid, you get a diagnosis and you end up with medical bills and you go bankrupt from that. That happens so frequently. So you want to make sure that you have 6 to 12 months saved up. Now, once you have 6 to 12 months saved up, now we want to start thinking about investing. Now, if you're not investing, you're going to be getting eaten alive by inflation. Now, a lot of people are not thinking about inflation. And the reality is, even in a good economy, you're looking at inflation being around 2%. Now, right now, as we're recording this, inflation is about 8.5%. So you don't want to count on it being as low as 2% because that's not always going to be the case. Now, the crazy thing is, most people don't understand what inflation actually is. So inflation is your ability to buy something goes down every year. That's the same as losing money every year. So imagine if you have $100. If inflation is 8.5% like it is now, the next year, by the next year, because it's happening every day, by the next year, you don't have $100. Even if you saved it, didn't touch it, it's locked away in your bank account. You now have the equivalent. It'll still say $100, but that $100 now only buys you the equivalent of $91.50. Okay? That's inflation. So your buying power, even though the number stays the same, the buying power is going down. So as of right now, as we're recording this, you would need to make $8.50 every year in order to stay at the buying power of your $100. Okay, so saving money, even though I just told you to save 6 to 12 months, you want to make sure that you understand that you can't just sock all of your money away and think that it's going to stay. And this doesn't haunt anyone more than me. I get it, because investing is nerve-wracking. But if you don't invest, you're not going to be able to keep up with inflation. If you don't keep up with inflation, you're going to be losing money over time. And if you're losing money over time, that nest egg that you're going to hope takes care of you at the end of the day isn't going to be there for you. And so you really have to be thoughtful about how you invest. Now, I'm going to give you the most basic advice on investing. Now, why am I giving you basic advice? Because all the smartest investors in the world are saying, if you don't know anything about investing, this is what you want to do. And because I do not consider myself a good investor, this is the only advice that I feel like I can give you that's actually sound advice. And that is to invest in passive things. So you're going to be investing in ETFs, in index funds. Now, index funds are the easiest to explain. An index fund is a group of companies. So rather than you saying, I'm so smart, I know what companies are going to do well, I would say, don't do that. Because even the smartest people that do this for a living have a hard time being right over a long period of time. Here is a fact that most investors don't want you to know. Most investors over a 10-year period are going to lose to an index fund. So the really smart people with all the algorithms, they're all going to lose to just picking a big basket of companies and investing in those and not touching the money. And then doing something called dollar cost averaging. So rather than thinking that you're so smart that you're going to beat the market, right? I'm going to time it. I know when the bottom is, right? Because the best advice on investing you're ever going to get is the following. Buy low, sell high. Now, I don't mean that as a joke. That really is the best advice you're ever going to get. The problem is most people can't do it. And the reason they can't do it is they get emotional or they don't have enough knowledge. And so I see so many people making these big bets because it's sexy, it's cool, and when it hits, you feel like a king. The problem is the house always wins. And the odds of you on a long timeline winning like that are virtually zero. And Ray Dalio made this really clear to me. So Ray Dalio runs the largest hedge fund in the world. It's called Bridgewater and Associates. And he says, Tom, look, I'm spending hundreds of millions of dollars on research. I've spent probably even more than that building the best algorithms in the world. I have a talent pipeline where I'm recruiting the best and the brightest people from across the entire world. I have fiber optic cables that allow me to make transactions that are measured in milliseconds. And you're competing against me if you're trying to actively trade in the market. And so that's why people like him who understand how this system works are saying for the average person, that's not the game that you want to play. The odds of you losing border on 100%. But if you go with something like an index fund, which is, there's one called the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is effectively the 500 biggest companies on the stock market. Now, the odds that you become one of the biggest companies on the stock market and stay there, you're going to stay there for something. I think the average company stays on the S&P 500 for like 16 years right now. Now, it's been declining, but still, that's a long time. And the way that the S&P 500 works is when one finally gets down to the bottom and it gets booted off, then they replace that with another one. And so you always have the top 500 companies in the stock market at that time. And there's a whole bunch of different index funds. It could be growth stocks, it could be stocks in foreign markets, and whatever one you're comfortable with. But at least it's a basket of stocks, and you're dollar cost averaging in, which just means that every day or every Wednesday or whatever, you're putting in a certain amount of money that you want to invest. And you're just going to leave it. You're not going to panic when the market goes down, and you're not going to, when prices are up, you're not going to buy into the euphoria. Now, why would you not want to do that? The reason that you don't want to buy into the euphoria is because when people are euphoric, prices are going sky high. Now, in those moments, and I have now lived through my first cycle where I was really paying attention to the market and it got euphoric. So now I know what it feels like. And what it feels like is it's always going to go up, that you're a genius. You're making all this money hand over fist. Now, the good news is when it all crashed, I didn't sell. I didn't buy like a fiend, it was going up, and I didn't sell when it went down, which means that I don't have any realized gains or losses. Now, of course, when things are going up, if you want to take money off the table, by all means do that. You then bought low and you sold high. Makes all the sense in the world. But the last thing you want to do is buy like crazy as the price is going up and then panic as the price drops because now you've bought high and sold low. But that's what most people do because The euphoria is so exciting and people feel like, oh, there's no way that I can lose. And then when the bottom falls out, they feel like, oh my God, it's only going down. This is all going to go to zero. And the reality is it might. But if you follow the principle of never investing more than you can afford to lose, then you can ride out the market. And if you're in a passive fund like the S&P 500, then it's just your dollar cost averaging. You're just buying at that steady interval. Now, when the price drops, you might buy more, right? If you know what a good deal looks like, hey, if the S&P 500 is down 20%, then maybe what I'm going to do is buy, instead of my $100 a week, I'm going to put in $150 or $200 if you have the capital to spare. Now you're getting things at a discount, right? I've heard it said, I think it was by Jaspreet Singh, that a recession is basically just a Black Friday deal for assets. Because now everybody's panicking, prices are falling, but if you've been passively investing into something as stable as the S&P 500, now you're just able to get more of that at a discount. It can be very advantageous. And this is why they say more millionaires will be made in a recession than in any other time, because all of these assets are on discount. Now the question is, what's an asset? And so this is another habit that keeps people broke, is they're not learning about money. They're not taking this time to figure out the difference between an asset and a liability. People are spending all of their money. Death habit number one, you're spending all of your money on liabilities and not assets. So the key is to understand what an asset is, to understand what a liability is, and to buy appropriately. An asset is something that when you buy, it's going to go up in value and not cost you money, or even pays you money. More money, obviously, than it costs you. If you have a liability, it's the exact opposite. So the classic example of a liability is a car payment. The second you drive a car off the lot, it's going down in value, and with very rare exception, it is never going to go back up. So it's going down in value, and you've got to keep making those payments. So you've got money going out while value is declining. Another one that people often think of as an asset, but is usually a liability, is your own home. Now, the reason that your own home is so frequently a liability is odds are you have a mortgage. Odds are it's the most expensive thing in your life. And it's not like you can just get out from under that liability, especially if the bottom falls out. You're going to have property tax depending on where you live, and you're going to have upkeep no matter where you live. So now you're pouring money into this thing, and maybe the value is going up, but maybe not always. And between the property taxes and the upkeep, you may be paying more than the value is going up over time, especially if you account for opportunity cost. So the odds of your house after taxes, fees, upkeep, all of that, being a better use of capital, if you're living in it, being a better use of capital than taking that same money and putting it into an index fund or something like that, a diversified portfolio, let's say, the odds of the house returning more on that are very low. Unless, obviously, if you get into rental properties and things like that and you're not living in it, so now it can actually generate cash flow, well, then it's just a math equation. This is how much I spend on average per month for insurance, property tax, upkeep, all of that. And if on average, the rent that you're getting is more than the money that you have going out, then it's very simple. Every month, I'm making more off of this property than I'm losing. Cool. Now you've got an asset. So that is the difference. If you're paying for something, it's a liability. If you're making money off of something, it's an asset. Now, most people don't have the discipline to buy assets because liabilities are usually the fun things. It's the cool clothes, it's the car, it's the fancy house, all of that stuff. And so people get themselves into a difficult situation because now the vast majority of their capital is going out. And this is how people end up in a position where they're living paycheck to paycheck. Okay, another thing I want to talk about that's a bad habit is that people are on a career path. Now, why is that bad, you ask? I have so many people around me at my company that are on a career path, and they're amazing people. But the people that really make money are the people that get so good at something that they can solve the most difficult problems that the company faces. So rather than thinking, oh, I am an editor, and so I'm going to get good at editing and I'm going to work my way up that way, you can basically predict what your salary is going to be. You're more or less going to get a 2 to 5% raise year over year. There'll be a couple times where maybe you're promoted into a role within that lane that has more responsibilities, and therefore you get paid more money. But you can just look at that career path and say, what is the person that's the highest in this chain that I'm working my way up? What do they make? That's what you're going to make, plus the sort of annual increases. On the other hand, if you look at who's the person in the company making the most money, full stop, now you begin to understand that just following that one career trajectory is not necessarily going to be as lucrative as solving those very difficult problems that the highest paid people in the company are solving. So I'll give you one example. If you want to get wealthy in a company, go into sales. I mean, that's just like the classic path to making money, because now if you're getting a commission off of what you sell, you're only hemmed in by how much you can sell and the price of the things you sell. So now you've got a lot more flexibility. So be very thoughtful as you're exchanging time for money. Don't forget that you also want to be in a position where you can exchange skill set for money, efficiency for money. All of those things allow you to break the basic time for money equation. And that is going to be far more lucrative. And now as you're making that extra capital, if you keep your costs of living low, now you're able to invest into those assets. And as you invest into assets, now you're kicking off either cash flow or you're building up wealth over time in something that can be sold for way more than you bought it for. Okay, if you do all of that, you can finally break these habits that are keeping you broke. There are almost certainly a lot of things that you're doing that are going to keep you broke.